and to welcome you to our Saturday Ngondro retreat. And I would like to start by thanking all of you for your donations, because with your donations we raised. Oh gosh, I forgot to look at the exact amount, but we raised something like, let's see what it says here. We raised money for the Columbus KTC's rebuilding, about $300 for the Columbus KTC rebuilding. We're now several months into our construction project. It's going to be finished in the summer, we hope, and knock on wood. And hopefully, when COVID uh, restrictions are lifted, we'll be able to see one another again. In the meantime, thanks for your donations, because they mean a lot to us, and they're making that center go up bit by bit. The bricks are now on the east wall, and I think the north wall has also been, the bricks have also been applied, so that leaves two more. So, and then I'd also like to welcome all of you from everywhere who want to come in and talk about Ngondro today. And to begin, Lama Tom, I'd like to invite you to kind of bring us in with some prayers this morning, and some opening words, please.
Sure. So why don't we start talking a little bit about the structure for today's retreat. First of all, I'll start with some discussion about Ngondro. We'll probably go from like, we will go from 9:30 until 11:30 or 12, depending upon what we have to talk about. So we'll be sort of flexible about that. First of all, I want to say how pleased I am that there are so many people from some very diverse places. That's really cool. So let's begin with taking refuge. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, I take refuge. By the power of generosity and all six perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, I take refuge. By the power of generosity and all six perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, I take refuge. By the power of generosity and all six perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. So I'd like to begin again by welcoming you all here. And I am particularly happy that Lama Kathy is able to join us. So I think we'll sort of divide it up into a two-parter, you might say. The first part, I'll discuss things relative to the to Ngondro itself. We'll talk about that. And then the second half, Lama Kathy's graciously accepted the responsibility to continue with our exploration of the prayer, the aspirational prayer for Mahamudra by the third Karmapa. I was a little hesitant in terms of how to approach this. And in terms of a retreat, you sometimes worry about making sure your thoughts are eloquent and your points are well relevant to the situation. And so I just stopped worrying about that and decided, instead of my words, I would use the words of the ninth Karmapa and in a series of discrete meditations. One of the things I want to say about any retreat is you have a responsibility on your own to try to gain as much as you can from it I can provide you with, and Lama Kathy can provide you with thoughts to take home with you. But in fact, the success or failure of a retreat relies primarily with you. And so I challenge you to accept the responsibility to gain as much as you can from this retreat on your own. I want you during this retreat to ask yourselves 3 questions. And at different times, we'll have opportunities to respond to my questions. The first question is, how has your spiritual life, and for that matter, your mundane life, changed as a result of your practice? How has it changed? That's the first question. The second question is, what are the obstacles you continue to experience that prevent you from practicing fully? That's the second question. And the third question is, how do I overcome those obstacles? So how have I changed as a result of practice? What are the obstacles? And what am I going to do about it? After a approximately 40-minute presentation, we'll talk about those questions and your answers to them. When you answer, you are certainly welcome to reveal as little or as much as you wish in terms of your answer. Then at lunchtime, I'm going to give you another sort of homework assignment during the period that we sort of take a break. And I'll give you that reflection later. So as I told you before, I thought we'd start with the words of the 9th Karmapa in his Mahamudra, Dispelling the Darkness of Ignorance, Wanchak Dorje, the 9th Karmapa. And he begins this book with a reflection on each one of the preliminaries, giving a sort of a pithy description of each of these preliminaries. Then he discusses the 4 thoughts. And finally, he gives the 4 conditions for any Dharma practice. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to use my own words. I'm going to use the words of the 9th Karmapa. So the first preliminary, before we do that, let's just take a moment to sort of calm ourselves down. We've reached this point here, and we are all together here. And so let's use this initial time to actually calm down, to relax. I'm not inviting you necessarily to meditate. I'm just asking you to look at your mind and allow it to calm down a bit. Relax. Completely relax and allow that mind to express its openness. And if there is any fear or anxiety that you're observing, go to it and see if that can be relaxed. If it cannot be relaxed, that's okay. Just be relaxed about having some anxiety. It's okay. So, as I said before, the ninth Karmapa begins with reflections on each of the preliminaries. And I am going to read them over to you. The first reflection is taking refuge and arousing bodhicitta. So imagine, visualize in the sky in front, visualize a wish-fulfilling tree with one trunk and 5 spreading branches. On the central branch are the gurus. In front are the yidams. Try to realize this, try to visualize this. To the right are the Buddhas, and to the rear, the Dharma, and to the left, the Sangha. Each are surrounded by many of their own kind. Imagine that you are standing in front as the leader with all your mother sentient beings gathered around and joining you in taking refuge. With the awareness that all sentient beings have been your parents, take refuge and arouse bodhicitta, wishing that all beings have happiness, are free from suffering, and will achieve unsurpassable awakening. In that state of mind, recite in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until awakening. Through the merit of generosity and the rest of the virtues, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all beings. Meditating on the 4 immeasurables, may all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free from suffering and the cause of suffering. May they never be parted from genuine happiness that is free from suffering. And may they abide with great equanimity, free from prejudice, attachment, and aggression. Let's meditate on that visualization and those words for just a moment. Imagine the grandeur and the beauty of such a picture. you there with all sentient beings, united in solidarity, prostrating and bowing before the refuge tree. What I have learned as a result of this practice is that we are not alone, that we are in solidarity with the aspirations of all beings, the aspiration to be happy, to be free from suffering. I noticed in the paper today a funny thing, an interesting thing, an oddity, something unexpected. In the United States, in the past year, suicide rates went down 6%. That goes against what was thought to be would be the case. They thought because of our isolation, our supposed isolation, that mental health issues such as suicide would become more pronounced. What seems to be the opposite is the case, 6% less suicides. Why might that be the case? Well, we can speculate, but it might be because there was this sense of solidarity. We're all in this thing together, that we actually improved our mental health. Such things also happen in wartime, and sometimes when there are major situations within the environment, hurricanes and that sort of thing. So what I've learned from this practice is that through my joining with all human beings, by my visualizing all sentient beings present with me and in solidarity with them and wishing them well, I approach a little closer to my own personal happiness, and as a consequence, the happiness of all beings. Let's go to the second meditation. The Karmapa says, meditate that Guru Vajrasattva is on your head. He is white, holding a Vajra in his heart, with his left hand resting with a bell on his hip, and adorned with the major and minor marks. Supplicate him. Guru Vajra Sattva, please purify my negative actions and obscurations. These negative actions and obscurations are not just in this lifetime, but all the obscurations and negative actions we've had from beginningless time. We're asking Vajra Sattva to purify. And then we perform confession. Not just mentioning or thinking about the most recent wrongdoing that we've done, but thinking that this has gone on from beginningless time. Meditate that white Amrita flows from the big toe of Vajrasattva into your head and fills your body. All your negative actions and obscurations depart, and the space left behind is filled with Amrita. And then pleased. And the picture I have of being pleased is Vajrasattva smiling. The guru melts into light. The body, speech, and mind of Vajrasattva and your body, speech, and mind mix inseparably. Let's just take a moment to consider that, to visualize that. What I have learned from this practice, and everyone's going to be different, of course, but what I have learned from this practice is that shame and guilt have no ultimate purpose. That our wrongdoing, because it is not ultimate, because it is not something substantial, real, permanent, can be purified. We confess, and a daily confession is very good. We confess daily because we aren't yet enlightened, and we are going to commit some wrongdoing probably every day. I know I do. But once confessed, and in this particular ritual, using Vajrasattva, that wrongdoing is no longer present. Shame and guilt have no ultimate value. The third contemplation from Karmapa is, for the Mandala, the practice of Mandala, we arrange 5 offering piles on a plate. Meditate that the gurus are in the center, the yidams are in front, the Buddhas to the right, the Dharma to the rear, and the Sangha to the left. On another mandala, arrange offering piles while reciting, the earth is perfumed with scented water and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Muru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. Imagining this as a Buddha realm, I offer it so that all beings may enjoy the pure realm. He further advises, make offerings actual and imagined. And we're making them to those in whom we take refuge. Imagine that. What I've learned from that practice And again, everyone's going to be different. But what I have learned from that practice is, even though I personally may be impoverished, lacking in understanding, virtue, and what have you, through my imagination, I can offer things of inestimable value. And through doing that, even though I personally am impoverished, I gain merit. I become more open. I become more free. Also, I recognize that even small things that I offer are of value, because by offering them, we're lessening our grasp to them. So whatever you may find of value, by making that offering, by loosening your grasp of them, you can become more free. And so the Karmapa ends this meditation by saying, grant your blessings that through the power of such offerings, I may fulfill the two accumulations and perfect experience and realization. We are working here in Ngondro to uncovering the nature of our own mind, to be able to see our mind clearly and with stability. And so through these offerings, we're loosening our grasp to all those things that obscure our openness and our ability to see. Finally, imagine that the deities of the practice, Mandala, melt into light and dissolve into you. The fourth meditation is Guru Yoga. Meditate that your root guru is on your head, either in their normal form or in the form of the Yida, whichever you prefer. Above your guru's head are all the gurus up to Vajradhara, either arranged one above the other or gathered around in a group. Supplicate with unbounded devotion and extraordinary longing, forcefully and for a long period, to ensure that your outlook is transformed. Meditate that the lineage gurus, Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and assemblies of Dakinis, Dharma protectors, and guardians dissolve into your root guru, who becomes the embodiment of all of them. Present offerings and offer service. Take refuge and arouse bodhicitta and supplicate fervently. And so we say, my mother sentient beings who equal the extent of space, supplicate the Guru, the precious Buddha. My mother sentient beings who equal the extent of space, supplicate the Guru, the all-pervasive Dharmakaya. My mother, sentient beings who equal the extent of space, supplicate the Guru, the Sambodhikaya of great bliss. My mother, sentient beings who equal the extent of space, supplicate the Guru, the compassionate Nirmanakaya. Think that the Guru then dissolves into you, and that the Guru's body, speech, and mind, and your body, speech, and mind blend without distinction. Rest within a state free from conceptual elaborations. Since Guru Yoga is a means of realizing Mahamudra, apply yourself to it. So again, rest in the understanding that your Guru is inseparable from you. What I've learned from this practice is that whatever good I've done, whatever blessings have come to me, and yeah, even the difficulties that have come to me are the result of my Guru's blessing. And to the extent that my mind is inseparable from my Guru's mind, really nothing can happen that I cannot manage. And I also recognize that when I do become overwhelmed, and I do, as probably many of you do, when I do become overwhelmed, it is because of my mindlessness, my forgetting that my Guru is as close as my next thought of him or her. And so this is why we really need to develop our devotion to our teachers, to our gurus, because this is going to be the only way we're going to find happiness. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Now, the Karmapa begins to discuss the four thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. And so I'd like to express his words. The first is the contemplation of death and impermanence. I will give you a little aside here. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche once told me when I was having difficulty practicing, he said, you know what you need to do? You need to go back to the four thoughts. Sometimes we get this notion that we've outgrown them. We don't need them. Well, when we get a big head like that, that's not a good thing. We do need to go back at different times and reflect on them. And I know as a practitioner, you do each day. But Lama Kathy's given us further directions, which is not just to recite them, but make them a heartfelt, how do they apply to me kind of approach. And that's really important. We can't do it every time, but we should often go back and try to develop a heartfelt sense of what these four immeasurables mean. The Karmapa said, if you do not contemplate impermanence, and this is in regards to death and impermanence, the first thought. If you do not contemplate impermanence, your mind will not turn away from this life. If you do not turn away from that, you will not be liberated from samsara. A very simple, raw statement. If we don't turn away from this life, we will never be liberated. And he says, reflect on Nagarjuna's observation. Many things endanger this life. More impermanent than water bubbles blown by the wind. That you inhale again after you exhale and wake up from sleep are marvelous things. All conditioned phenomena are impermanent, and in particular, since the life force of beings is as ephemeral as water bubbles, you never know when yours will be destroyed. It is not even certain that you will not die right now. When you die, nothing other than the Dharma will be of any help. If you engage in futile worldliness and activities for just this life, you will not transcend the causes of suffering. And he says, now promise yourself that the moment your mind wanders to concerns about food, clothing, and similar things of this present life, you'll remember death. But he's also saying there, of course, it's difficult to do that in every situation, but when we start grasping, holding on tightly to something, either in the way of aversion or attraction, indifference, whatever, be aware of impermanence. Be aware that you're going to die. From time to time, count how many of your relatives and close friends have already died. Think about how they died and that once they were taken to cemeteries, nothing remained of their bodies. You and me are not beyond this natural situation. When by contemplating that, you tremble with fear, like someone caught by their executioner, your mind will not be distracted and you will give up concerns of this life. Meditate intently on this. Contemplate death and impermanence. This is the fifth of the Karmapa's contemplations. Let's take just a moment to make that contemplation heartfelt. Mama Kathy today posted something on Facebook from Zanzar Khyentse Rinpoche, and it's relevant to this contemplation. And I thought I'd share it with you today. Khyentse Rinpoche says, fear and anxiety are the dominant psychological states of the human mind. Fear and anxiety. Behind the fear lies a constant longing to be certain. We are afraid of the unknown. The mind's craving for confirmation is rooted in our fear of impermanence. Fearlessness, on the other hand, is generated when you can appreciate uncertainty, when you have faith in the impossibility of these interconnected components, which are our lives, remaining static and permanent. So we have faith in impermanence. You will find yourself in a very true sense, preparing for the worst while allowing for the best. If we have faith that whatever we see as permanent right now, if we can actually have faith that it's going to crumble, it's going to fall, it's going to dissipate, it's going to go. If we have faith in that, we're preparing for the worst, which is change. Nobody particularly likes that. But if we can have faith in impermanence, when it occurs, we'll say, well, of course, instead of why now? Why me? And if it sticks around, whatever it is that we are enjoying, well, then that's okay too. The next contemplation is from the Karmapa again. And it is a contemplation of karma. It is imperative that you not be confused about what is to be taken up and what is to be rejected in terms of karmic process of causes and results. Beings experience the results of the actions they have done. Beings experience the results of the actions they have done. Their actions ripen for them alone. Those who engage in unvirtuous activities are reborn in negative states. Depending on which of the three poisons is involved, the frequency of their actions, the gravity of the object, and the scale of their actions, beings are born as hell beings, hungry ghosts, or animals. Once born in those states, they experience the sufferings of that specific state, which is difficult to imagine. Those who engage in major, intermediate, or minor virtuous actions are reborn in the desire realm as gods or humans in the form realm or the formless realm. You should at all times examine your three doors: body, speech, and mind. Take delight in whatever virtuous actions you have done and put an end to unvirtuous actions. without mixing up what is to be abandoned with what is to be adopted, what is to be undertaken with what is to be shunned, sever the stream of unvirtue and set in motion a continuous flow of virtue with your three doors. Determine for yourself that those habits that cause yourself and other people pain, you're going to abandon. And those things that cause yourself and other people real happiness, you're going to adopt. Sometimes we're not really mindful of that. And so this reminder is, you know what to adopt, you know what to abandon, and more importantly, and most importantly, you have within yourself the power to know the difference and to take up what is virtuous. He says that is the point of the Buddhist teaching and what enables us to accomplish the aim of our practice. Therefore, train yourself with a subtle awareness. He uses the word subtle awareness. I'm not knowing for sure what he meant here, but I think sometimes we crudely know what to accept and what to abandon. We do know that. But oftentimes we say, well, we sort of become mindless and let this small, unvirtuous act go untended. And of course, what happens is this little thing explodes. And one thing leads to another, and we're, because of this mindlessness, we aren't aware of this escalation, a bad habit. I'm reminded of the story of a friend who had a problem with gambling. And he was flying from New York to Los Angeles. And when he booked his flight, he saw that one flight stopped over in Las Vegas. And so without thinking, he just made the flight, made the booking. And of course, you know what would happen. Initially, he didn't really think about that. It wasn't uppermost in his mind, but then when he got there. So there was maybe a part of him or that recognized that was not such a good thing to do, but he went ahead and did it. So we can be, in a sense, seduced into those kinds, thinking that, well, it's harmless, it's no big deal. And then wrong happens. This is the sixth contemplation. The seventh contemplation, contemplation of the deficiencies of samsara. Following the above contemplation, if you do not contemplate the deficiencies of samsara, you will not develop revulsion for it and the determination to be released from it. Without those catalysts, meditation, experiences, and realization will not arise in your mind, and you will lack the circumstances for them to arise. To prevent that, you must contemplate the sufferings of samsara. I have had a student with me off and on for the past 10 years. And I've tried to be a spiritual director for him. And I don't want to judge him. He's in the place where he's at, and I would not want to abandon him. But it seems like he has a very difficult time developing his spiritual life and spiritual practice. And as I begin to analyze what it is that's happening, I realize that he's using his spiritual practice to try to enhance his everyday life, his samsaric existence. Advice I have given him winds up on his website that he uses in his business. He's using spiritual advice to try to make mundane gains. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Your guru is not like a career consultant. It's not like these, and you've seen them, these life coaches that go around spewing their stuff. That's not what the Dharma is, and that's not what teachers and gurus are. The hard, raw fact is that unless we begin to turn away from, gradually, slowly, of course, but turn away from simple, mundane, everyday concerns, unless we are more concerned about our interior development and turn away from all these kinds of things, at least for the time of practice. And when you're being given spiritual direction, unless we're able to do that, it's not likely we're going to make much progress. In fact, it's pretty certain we won't. I'm going to stop here because, and I would ask us all to join now back together, if we can do that. Tanya, can you put us all together here now?
I've removed the spotlight. If anybody is still seeing Lama Tom's picture as or mine as your main picture, you can go up into the upper right-hand corner of your Zoom screen and change to gallery view, so you'll see all the little boxes together. If you need help, just send me a private message on the chat.
So, hello there, everybody. Nice to see you all again. So I did ask you 3 questions in the beginning. And the questions were, first of all, how has Dharma practice changed your spiritual life and your mundane life? The second question I've asked is, I better look at those questions, hadn't I? What are obstacles? What are some of the obstacles that you're encountering? And how do you see overcoming? What kind of a plan do you have to overcome those obstacles? And I would like to entertain our discussion on that. It's a little difficult here on Zoom, but not impossible. So let's have a discussion about that. Anyone want to start? Don't be bashful.
And by the way, everyone, you have the power to unmute yourself, but just remember to stay muted when you're not actively participating so that we can avoid background noise. Thank you.
It will break the ice.
Lama Tom,
Yes.
it's Patricia.
Hi.
I'm just hi. I mean, you've shared so much to think about. I'm just wondering if it's just me, or when you were having the thing about the 4 thoughts that turn the mind toward the Dharma. I wondered, like, about the first one. At least I was thinking is first is precious human life, so favorable for the practice of the Dharma. Did in the reflections that were shared, somehow I missed that. I got the impermanent aspect, and then I could get the karma and the defects of samsara. But it just caused me to think a lot also about how with those 4 thoughts, especially with what you brought up at the end about the deficiencies of samsara, that the main problem seems to me about my ego clinging and attachment, and that the practice of trying to get insight into these relationships with samsara is to allow some kind of change, and yet it speaks to us even in the lineage prayer about when we practice the Dharma, if we get to a certain understanding that samsara and nirvana are inseparable. So I just wondered if you could address that a little bit, because I think that that's part of the Dharma that seems very wonderful and difficult to understand.
Mhm. Thank you, Patricia. I have saved that last one before I turn it over to Lama Kathy. I'm going to save that last contemplation about the opportunities and preciousness of human life. But thank you for bringing that up. And that will be my last contemplation. Help me a little bit, because I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Could you sort of put it in a sentence that would be helpful to me?
Well, it seems like, I don't know, but it seems like with these 4 thoughts to turn the mind toward the Dharma, it's like something's trying to teach us to change our whole way of dealing with reality and not be so stuck in our solid life that, like you said, we can't make any spiritual progress. And yet it seems like if we follow this direction, there's some kind of blessing that comes from this right relationship that then results in like this bliss or vision, like you were talking about, that as long as we're connected with the guru, nothing can happen that we can't deal with.
Yes.
That can't be a blessing. You said even the difficulties of life.
Yes.
So if you can say more, I'm just looking for wisdom, but I get confused. So thanks.
Well, Patricia, from what I hear from you, I think you have gotten the picture. which is slowly over time, we're trying to unburden ourselves with this thing called ego. We have mistakenly thought that this is the source of our happiness. And we have thought that from beginningless time. And what the Dharma is pointing out to us is that if we let go of that, if we drop it, even for a moment, we're going to experience the same kind of pleasure that a workman who's carrying a big bundle on the back of his neck, who lets it down. You're also right in terms of, and it's not a confusion, it is understandable, this process of letting go. If we could do it in a moment, we would all be Buddhists, right? So it's a process over time. And it's through these contemplations that we slowly get to the point that ego is no longer a problem. But we shouldn't be too impatient with that. And so that's why we have the Vajrasattva practice. Anytime that we see that we have been selfish or screwed up, all we have to do is turn to the contemplation of Vajrasattva. There are other rituals that we can perform also, but that seems to be, within the context of Ngondro, the most powerful. So, Patricia, I'm going to say to you, I don't think you're confused about that. I think you do understand that this is a process. What's difficult, however, is to recognize that it's a gradual process. And sometimes we get confused thinking that because I've done it once, I don't have to do it again. Well, that's what practice is all about. We do it over and over until we've got these imprints from beginningless time. So it's a process. What gives us hope is when we turn our minds and our hearts and our bodies to our gurus, to perfect examples of people who have dropped the load. and that's why we want to join our minds with theirs, because their minds are open, free, and to the extent our minds are inseparable from theirs, we'll be free. So again, Patricia, I don't think you're so confused. I think you got it.
Thank you for the good news. Thank you for some good news. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Lama Kathy, do you have things you'd like to respond to that?
I had to find the unmute button. I think that's exactly, I'm with you 100% of the way. I do understand Patricia's question because Buddhism can be complicated because there are so many statements of what's important. It's important to do this, it's important to do that. And because there are so many statements about that, it's easy to become like, okay, which of these very important things do I have to pay attention to? But what's really great is that human beings are natural filters. We would make a good cup of coffee. We are natural filters, and that even though we have confusion from beginningless time, right? We have confusion, we're still part of us really knows the right way to go. Part of us naturally and intuitively knows the right way to go. And then we get, then as we process ourselves with these contemplations and meditations and prayers, as we process ourselves, we actually then begin to take on and as you say, learn to unburden ourselves first in small ways and then in larger ways. And then we gradually come to find that from a different going to give us happiness, but our inner development that is going to give us happiness. And as you say, the examples of our teachers are like a beacon on the hill. We just got to keep heading for it, you know. And so I'm totally in agreement, Patricia. You have filtered through. You have filtered through the teachings, right? And filtering through the teachings, you've come to a correct understanding. So go baby, as they say. And Lama Tom, I want to point out that there was a comment in the chat from someone who has a lawnmower going on outside. And
Oh.
anyway, back to Patricia. Thank you, dear. That was great.
Yes.
And thank you, Lama Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you
Lama
for
Tom, our attendee, Tom, not you, has posted his response in the chat. And if I can read it to you if you'd like, or
Yeah.
Tom can.
Yeah, please do.
Tom, do you want to do it yourself? Okay. And you can unmute yourself, Tom.
Okay, yeah. So I'd say like how things have changed is that I would say more than many years ago, or I have a more consistent daily practice. So doing shrine offerings, daily meditation, a lot of reading and a lot of contemplation. So I would say that over time, my interest, respect, and I guess dedication to practice is growing the more I am involved with group practices like this, and more, you know, amazing teachings from Lama Tom and Lama Kathy and all of our Rinpoches and Khenpos. Some obstacles I still have is that, you know, the more I read and the more, you know, I've done like the 4 thoughts that turn the mind, it's like, I'm still not doing enough, right? I still have that feeling like there's like, maybe that's a bit of guilt, like all that time I wasted, I could have been doing this. Like, you know, I could have been done with Ngondro by now, right? But, you know, I think it's more of some of that, but then it's like, sometimes I'm like, did I do that right? Did I say that right? So it's like some obstacles are just like mental, you know, complications. But then what am I doing about it is just continuing on with meditation through some of the Tonglen practices, always looking at the mind that thinks the way that it is at that moment in time. Even though I may have completed Vajrasattva in Ngondro, I still use it as a daily practice to at least recite it once, twice, a few rounds a day, just to help dissolve or purify those thoughts and actions. And then with my primary practice of Mandala, to help offer not only, you know, Mount Meru, the sun and the moon, it's also all those good actions and maybe even some of those other things that, those intentions and hopes to help purify a stable mind. So.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Tom. So what you're saying is that as a result of practicing, whether it's good weather or bad weather, you just do it. I think that's important. What Daryl Peters one time said, just do it. That was his motto for beginners and for all of us, actually. Just do it. And because these practices have been instituted by enlightened beings, they probably know what they're thinking or what we should do. So just doing it over time creates the conditions for actually being able to internalize it. The second thing you said that I thought was important is sometimes one of the obstacles is that you don't know if you're doing it right or doing it properly and that sort of thing. And I understand that. So what you do in those circumstances is ask a question. Resolve your doubts and don't accept not being able to resolve it. Now, some doubts are such that it takes time to figure it out. So you be patient with it. You know, you might put it, well, this is a doubt I know I need to resolve sometime or another, but I can't right now. I'll ask questions, and even sometimes the answers don't fully answer your doubt. but you have faith in your teachers, in the teaching, and more importantly, faith in yourself that you're going to resolve that doubt. Some of the most important sessions I ever had with Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche was actually in the questions and answers after his talk, because people brought up the same questions and doubts that I had that I was too afraid to ask. So questioning your teachers, doing research and trying to find out the answer, all that is important. The other thing, and I said it in the very beginning, one of the biggest teachings of Buddhism is you're responsible. That's hard. I mean, that's hard to take, but it's the truth. If you're not where you want to be, you're responsible. I hate that. Sometimes I hate to have to reflect on the fact that I am where I am because of what I've done. And so if I don't ask questions, if I don't resolve my doubts, what can happen is, and I've seen this, really experienced practitioners have fallen off. And I don't know all the reasons why that may happen, but sometimes it's directly the result of their not having resolved those initial doubts they had. Again, I'm saying it's okay to sort of put them to a side while you continue to practice, but at some point you need to work on resolving all your doubts. And the last thing you said in terms of what's the remedy, perfect. Continue, keep going. That's the idea. Perseverance, as the Karmapas have said, if you persevere on this path, you will ultimately reach realization. That's the Mahamudra aspirational prayer says that. You will, if you persevere. Now, whether it's in this lifetime or the next is a question, but nonetheless, you can make progress. So that's great. Lama Kathy, I want you to chime in on this if you don't mind.
Sure. And I'm fine so far. Everything is it's all coming together very nicely with the comments that people are making and the discussion that's going on. I think it's really wonderful because the only other comment I would make is that I completely understand what I am going to call Catholic guilt. I know you may not have been a Catholic in your earlier pre-Buddhist life, but I was, and I totally understand what that is. And sometimes we do judge ourselves in our practice unnecessarily harshly. And this is a habit that can come from childhood. Perhaps we had adults in our lives that criticized us very strongly, and then we internalize those voices, and then they come back to haunt us later when we're trying to accomplish something. And so that's the never, there's, you're never doing enough, quote unquote, that whole idea of never doing enough. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at where you have been and where you are now, lots of improvement has been made and lots of change has already been made. And there is no reason to assume that that will not continue to be the case. There's no reason for us to assume that the improvements we made from the past to today will not keep going. And if we persevere, which is why I think that's the best advice is persevering. I also do understand what Lama Tom said about doubts. When we're going through the book, in the book, Trungpa Rinpoche talks about hearing, contemplating, and meditating. The three parts of practice is first you hear the Dharma, then you contemplate the Dharma, then you practice the Dharma. Well, part of contemplation, according to Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, is asking questions and clarifying doubt. So forums like this one are ideal because we're supportive of one another And it's okay to have doubt, and it's okay because we bring our habits of thinking with us when we go into Dharma. And what we hope to have happen is that as our qualities ripen and our defects get a little bit less, we'll be able to see our doubts in a new light and be able to find ways to make accommodation with them and to work with them and to see which ones of them are necessary and which ones are unnecessary, and then gradually work through all of them. So I'm right there with you.
Some other thoughts from folks about either their, what they've learned, what's practice done for them, or their obstacles they're facing, or their plan to deal with those.
I have a quick one, which I think, because I think the answer might be the same for this concern, which might make it a quick question. The biggest obstacle I think I've been worried about, at least lately, is that and maybe this is natural, my practice seems to go in waves, and like in a wave pattern, like I'll have expansion and then followed by a strong contraction, and then I worry about that contraction. But I'm guessing, and I'd like to hear your thoughts, is the response really just the same, which is just perseverance and looking at the bigger arc and not worrying about the waves along the arc, as long as there's an arc. That's my.
Yeah, you said something about the practice diminishing. I didn't get that quite.
Yeah, it's like waves, I feel like things are, and here it's probably, maybe I'm judging it too much too. I things will be going well, or I feel like I'm expanding, like I'm growing quickly, and my compassion is growing, and just feeling good about, I feel like I'm changing in a good way. And then it's almost like it gets too scary and things are changing really fast. And then I'll just go whoop, and kind of close back up again. And then it takes a while to get kind of back on track. And maybe I'm judging it too much, or maybe that wave pattern is kind of natural. I'm not sure. So I would love to hear from people who are much more experienced than me, what they've experienced with that.
Excellent. So let's hear from, before I jump in and make a statement, I would like to hear from other folks about this feeling of sort of the ups and downs. Would that be how you would characterize it, Tanya? Sort of ups and downs?
It could be ups and downs, or to me, it feels like expansion and contraction. Like things are changing, things are developing. I feel like I'm becoming a more open person and kinder. And then that gets really scary. And so then I start to close back up again. And then it reopens, but then I judge myself, and that kind of thing. So kind of expanding, contracting, but also you could think of it as a wave pattern.
Yeah. Anybody would like to respond to that?
Are the ups and downs like the amount of practice that you do, and then you're off for like a week, and then you come back and you're like meditating 5 hours a day, and then it's like, oh no, I'm off for a week?
Yeah, I have done that sometimes, especially if I do something really intense. Like a couple weeks ago, I joined the big intense White Tara retreat, and my practice did fall off a little bit after that, because it was almost a little overwhelming to do that so intensely for a week. But normally I'm able to stick with my daily practice, even though I might do a little more one day and a little less another day. And it's more just, I think, about the emotional changes and kind of closing back up again when that gets a little scary, and maybe being a little shy of practice because of that. So, and that may have to do with some traumatic background I have. I have a history, because of a childhood experience of having those kinds of like emotional shutdowns when things get a little scary sometimes.
One of the things I want to say initially, Tanya, is, and I don't mean this in a off the hand way, I really mean it. I mean, join the human race. We are all like this. we have our ups and downs. The instructions, the practice instructions from our gurus is to to maintain practice, even with the extreme ups and the extreme downs, that's not what we are putting our focus or attention on. It's hard not to. And I really understand when you say you've done an intense practice for a long time, and then, gee, I'm gonna reward myself here a little bit, and I'm gonna take some time off. I deserve it. Which
And
is
also, I just felt really wiped out too, really wiped
well,
out.
sure. Yeah, and that's those kind of situations are unusual, and you're right. Sometimes you actually do need to take a little break from the intensity of a practice. But the important thing is that ups or downs, what normally happens when there are ups or there are downs is we become overwhelmed. And what our teachers are trying to get us to is not becoming so overwhelmed that we do not continue to practice. That's the deal. So I think that's normal to have feelings of like, this is really cool. And that doesn't mean that it's not. You may be, I think you should expect that that's probably true. I am learning to be more kind and more honest and more open. And that's not a lie. It's a truth. At the same time, because we have these habits from beginningless time, they're going to crop up every once in a while. I mean, at some point there'll be less so, but that they pop up is not. We don't get shamed by it. We just say there it is, and I apply my practice to it. So it's like that too. But I guess, Tanya, I'm saying I'm with you, and I think everybody in this crowd would be with you on that. I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding. Thank you for that.
Thank you. That helps a lot. It's very affirming and encouraging, and I'll keep going. So thank you.
Yeah. That's, I mean, in the Great Path of Awakening, one of the slogans is, and I can't quote it exactly, but be unwavering in your practice. Meaning practice, whether you're feeling good or you're feeling bad. Some people find it much easier to practice when they're feeling good. There's other people who feel that they practice better when things are really rotten. Everybody's a little bit different, but the point of the practice is continue. It's like that. Other thoughts? Patricia.
Lama Tom, along with what Tanya was sharing, I do feel very familiar with the ups and downs and the feelings and the energy changes. And it does seem like part of my experience is that it just becomes reassuring, at least to me, to continue to practice. I may notice, and sometimes I'm disappointed that I don't have the same feeling of devotion or the same sense of connection. And I too am, there was a really good description about that expansion and contraction, and kind of having enthusiasm at times about the direction in which we're going. But at the same time, I'm familiar with that fear sometimes of like that human part of, I don't know who I'm becoming, or I don't know how to relate to it. But it seems like having the Ngondro practice, it always gives you something to do. And so if you keep practicing, that's something you can count on, is that your practice is there for you. So thanks.
Yeah. Patricia, you mentioned something about identity. And we all have these heavy burdens of identities, whether it's teacher, mother, students, worker, what have you. We all have these identities. But recollect that in spiritual practice right now, our identity, what we're striving for, is to be bodhisattvas. That's what we're becoming. Keep that in mind, that when we get overwhelmed by all these other things, that's the only important identity we should. And even at one point when we become Buddhists, we'll give up even that identity. But the whole thing of where am I going is we're going towards becoming bodhisattvas. And what does that mean? That means that, at least at this point, that we're considering others at least as much as how we consider ourselves. And we're working towards that. That's our goal. And we'll have expansions and contractions on that all the time. Sometimes we'll feel like, boy, I'm being a really good bodhisattva here. And then the next moment we'll say, my gosh, how could I have been so selfish? And what do you do in that situation? You re-identify yourself as a bodhisattva and continue on the bodhisattva path. It's like that. Again, thank you, Patricia. Other folks that we haven't heard from yet. Yes, Deborah.
I'm relatively new to Ngondro. It's been a little bit more than a year. I started just shortly before COVID hit. And I think if there is a blessing to COVID, it's just that it gave me that much more time to devote to practice. Although I had made the commitment prior to COVID, it just somehow made it quite a bit easier, I think. The thing that I've seen over time, irrespective of Ngondro, as my mother died at 94, and her last decade, I just watched her gradually go into Alzheimer's. So I made a commitment to myself then to work on being less reactive and more compassionate. And I have seen that develop in myself. I have seen myself not immediately react to something someone says or does, and I just became much more compassionate toward my mother, whom growing up was difficult for me. My parents were very set in their mindset, and mine was very different. So I always battled with them. So, I was able to let that go. And there were 2 or 3 people outside of my mother that I disliked for one reason or another, and I have let that go. And so I feel that's been a good thing for me. I really, when I sort of imagine people that, you like, that are neutral, that you don't like, I don't really have anybody in the don't like anymore. So I think that's a good thing. And I've just done a lot more reading outside of Dharma classes, Dharma related reading. So those are the things. For me, my biggest obstacle in this last year is having health issues. So I have worked at maintaining a daily practice, even if I've had to cut back. So I would say that's my biggest obstacle right now.
Thank you, Deborah. That's excellent. There are a couple of things that I would like to react to, if you don't mind. It's really good that you were able to use this time, this precious time, where you were basically sort of like us older folks were locked down, and you used it appropriately. And that's wonderful, because many folks use this time to for whatever, and so that's good. The other thing that you point out is that and I hope you don't mind because I'm in your category of an older person, that we still have issues that may be going back to our parents, and we still have to work on our resentments and our anger. And that's, so often the picture is, well, when we're this age, we should have been able to resolve that sooner. But that's not the way it always goes. We often have these kind of issues, and we shouldn't be ashamed that it's now at this late stage in our lives that we're able to let go of that. That should be not something we're ashamed of, but we celebrate. I can let go of the fact that my mother or my father was just like me, he suffered. And just like me, he had difficulty expressing himself appropriately. And just like me, he did things that he shouldn't have done. He's just like me, and I forgive them. That's monumental. That's important. So any of you who have these kind of things going on, look at us old folks. We're still working on it, and it's okay. The obstacle of health issues, I understand, particularly if we have certain expectations of what our practice must be. If we think that, last summer I fell and broke both my wrists. And so if I expect to be able to do prostrations as I did before, I can't do that. So if that's my expectation, I'm going to be very disappointed in myself and in my practice and get all verklempt about not being able to do prostrations. But if I could, and there's always an answer, there is never not a remedy to these difficulties if we look hard enough. The remedy to that is all the people whose wrists won't bend, I take on their pain. And may they be free of it. And by my working through the fact that I can't do this, by my working through this, may I attain Buddhahood, and may they also. And Buddhahood is a place where risks are not a big deal. So that's, an older practitioner can focus on regret, on that they didn't start earlier, or they didn't do this, or they didn't do that. It's our karma. It's where we're at. And that we shouldn't diminish the idea that whatever time is left to us can be well spent in practice and very profitably. I was telling Lama Kathy, I was reading a book by I don't know the fellow's name, the author, but it was about Michelangelo. And at 71, he lived till 89, I think. And from 71 to 89 was his most valued time. He spent it being the architect of St. Peter's. So, he did a lot of great stuff in the earlier life, but his greatest accomplishment by many people's estimation is the fact that he built St. Peter's. He was the architect. So us older folk need not despair. There are things we can do. And it's not a question of longevity between now, we may die tomorrow, but in this moment, we can develop enormous amounts of merit. Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche once said to me that if done right, one recitation of the Vajrasattva mantra can clear all the imperfections, all the wrongdoings that we've accumulated over many lifetimes. So we shouldn't despair because of this numerical identity we place on ourselves. Thank you. Thank you very much, Deborah.
Thank you.
Yes, Marilyn.
Okay, I'm going through a huge change right now. I have lived in this house for over 40 years. I'm a pack rat, I confess. I came to Dharma trying to control samsara all the time. Lama Kathy has reminded me over the years, you're trying to control samsara. You can't do that. It's impossible. I'm using every practice I have ever heard or used to get through this time. I have a time frame of several months when I'm going to be out of here, getting rid of stuff, coming up with money, coming up, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? I have relied so much on this practice, especially the four thoughts, because I realize I'm coming up on my 72nd birthday. I know the life I have ahead of me is very short compared to what has gone behind me. So that moves me to go forward. The deficiencies of samsara is also really in my face right now. So the Ngondro practice, I'm in Bodhichitta right now, but I also, because of Rinpoche's passing, do one session of Guru yoga with him every day. Oh my gosh, I can't thank him enough. And I also have ramped up just offering crazy things every day. Every time I get in the shower, I offer the water and soap to all the enlightened beings and give all the merit to all beings to become awakened. Driving down the street, I see a weeping cherry. I dedicate the weeping cherry to everybody, offer it up. I have ramped up everything because I'm under a lot of stress and anxiety, and that keeps me level-headed. I also came to Buddhism with a lot of anger, which I realized over the years that it was because I fear change so much. And this is a huge change. And I'm not angry. I've progressed. I'm not angry about it. Where before I would have been just so angry because I'm moving and I have all this junk that I accumulated, and I look at it and I go, why did I even want it in the first place? And it just, everything is like, it's like my whole practice is on high alert right now. So that's where my head is, but this stuff is working, even though it's like little chips, little baby steps. But I think, baby steps become a forward motion, no matter how small they are.
I love what you just said, Marilyn, in regards to high alert. I love that sort of thought. No, I'm serious. Sometimes when things go crazy, or we start experiencing really strong afflictive emotions, or we know a situation is going to be sort of a trigger for us. Change is a trigger for all of us, and what you're experiencing, we all experience. But the next thing is to recollect that it is something that causes us difficulty and go on high alert, sort of like we're in a submarine and all the bells and sounds go off, And so instead of submerging, of course, we're going to become more aware and open to what we need to do to practice. So I love that concept of high alert, because frequently when those things arise, we sort of hover and get fearful and close up. Oh, I got to change. This is going to happen to me. And you're saying, oh no, I'm on high alert. I have to maybe, in a sense of exaggerate to keep my equanimity. So thank you for that little phrase. So we can all, when something is going difficult for us, we're on high alert to practice. That's cool. Thank you.
And I also realized that what I anticipate doesn't occur the way my anxiety thinks it's going to go. I thought I was
Sure.
going to need a new roof. Okay, I'll give you this example. I thought I was going to need a new roof this week because I had a leak upstairs. So the roofer came and he goes up there and he comes down and he said, "Ma'am," he says, "there's nothing wrong with your roof, but there is a dam of raccoon poop where the gable meets the roof, and it's causing the water to fill up there and go underneath the shingles." He said, "When I kick that off, you should have no more leaks." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Ay, ay, ay." And he didn't even charge me for coming out. I mean, just stuff like that has been happening a lot. So it's just like, I try to keep myself from anticipating what's going to happen, which is really, really hard for me to do. Really hard for me to do.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, again, it's our meditation practice can help us with that, because in meditation, the idea is not to have regrets about the past, not to anticipate the future, which who knows what that's going to be, and to rest in the present, and even to drop the concept of resting in the present and just be. And that's a hard thing to do unless we are practicing meditation and doing our practice. So cool. Yeah, we all got the raccoons with the poop in the attic someplace or another. We all got something like that going on. And, how big a deal is that? How important is that? But at the time, raccoon poop in the attic seems really important. Quote of the day. Someone's writing quote of the day. Oh, okay, that will be the quote of the day on high alert. Huh?
I need that on a t-shirt, I think.
Anyway, thanks for listening to me.
Some other folks that haven't spoken who might like to. Yes, Evelyn. I can't hear you.
Hi. Yes, I just unmuted. So
Okay.
I do think, my practice is like a real foundation for me every day, that I know I'm going to do Ngondro, and that's been very helpful. I do feel more open, and I've been trying to do the practice where I see random people and I imagine, oh, this person was my mother, or I was this person's mother, and I try to do it with not always successfully, but sometimes with figures on the news and television, and every once in a while I get a fleeting glimpse of that. But I do want to say that over the past year, probably especially, I've had, some anxiety about situations, and it's affected my practice in that I've just been more distractible in my practice, and it's been harder to focus. So for a while, I was trying to just kind of slog through it. And then I finished Vajrasattva practice and started Mandala practice. And then I thought maybe if I made my practices shorter, I would be more focused. But now I'm actually thinking that I need to make them longer, because they probably maybe settle into things better. So those were my strategies, right? What have been my strategies, kind of, and what I'm working on.
Yeah. What I would say to that, Evelyn, is I like your attitude of experimentation. Teachers can give you instructions, but how you implement them in your life, they don't always know your circumstances. So you're saying maybe long would be better than short. try that, see if that works for you well, and do it that way. But, so often, because people tend to be really concrete when given instructions, they don't realize that within those instructions, with respect, you can experiment. Always, of course, talking to your teacher to make sure that this is on the right way. But experimentation with your practice is important, really important. So good. The other thing you're pointing out that I think is really cool is that so often you'll hear people say, I don't got time to practice. I got this to do. I got that to do. And we're missing the things right under our nose, or as Marilyn said, she sees a beautiful tree. That's a practice for her.
Yeah.
So this is a false argument that we make when we say we don't have time to practice. Every moment could potentially be a moment for practice. And it counts. We sort of think, these things count, these things don't. That's not, that's just, that's not right. It's if we're making offerings, or if we're looking at being less selfish, that's practice. It's really true. So thank you for reminding us that there are opportunities all the time, every day, in fact, every moment to practice. That's cool.
Okay. Thank you.
And anxiety, again, it may be a lifelong struggle. I don't know. Sometimes it has to do with the chemistry of our body. I mean, it's just,
Right.
we can't always manage that, unfortunately,
Right.
in the short term. But even in our anxiety, we can practice by saying, may all those who
Right.
feel like I do,
Yeah.
the fire
Right.
drill here.
I do. Yep.
And it works because you're not alone, and you're going to work through it. And through working through it, you're going to be wiser and more open and more closer to Buddhahood. So there's always that's the optimistic thing about practice. There's always a way to get through it, and practice can help us do that. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Some more comments. Anybody else who hasn't spoken want to speak? Yes, Justin.
Thanks, Lama Tom. So I'm in the prostration phase of Ngondro, and I've noticed, we talked a lot about dedication of merit and offering. So I work as a hospital chaplain, and dedicating the work at the end of the day, and then also I split my practice. I do another session when I come home. That really helps me kind of give back maybe all the emotional stories or the whatever I was, who I was with, and whatever the trauma or the death, because I was sort of carrying that out with me and thinking oh, that's being a good helper if I kind of keep this emotional burden too. So a big learning for me has been about that compassion practice, Tonglen for yourself, Tonglen for others. I recognized one obstacle I have is from my own upbringing and experience with various faith traditions and faith leaders is a real lack of trust and devotion to the idea of a guru. I want to take samsara by the reins. We're going to lead it out. I know the path for me. So I've included in my dedication of merit a prayer to increase faith, love, trust, and devotion in my guru and my lineage. And I've found that sort of working on that, softening down the edges, kind of working on that obstacle, and even just calling on Tara when I'm standing on my mat to say can you remove the obstacles from my visualization of the refuge tree. I've noticed has been helpful. Yeah. And I've been, a Buddhist practitioner on Zoom. So very maybe twice 3 times I've been with Lama Jinpa in Silver Springs, Maryland. So being in community in person is new, and kind of like I'm self-conscious because I don't really know all that you're supposed to do when you're in person. But there's that vulnerability piece of it too, that I'm like, okay, you can make mistakes. You don't have to be in control or so achievement focused.
Yeah, excellent. Anything else, Justin?
I just appreciate the opportunity to share in group with other people. Thank you.
Yeah. So a couple of things I would want to say is what is happening to you at one time or another will happen to all of us, which is our practice becomes our refuge. We can go to it in difficult times or in good times. There's not a time we cannot take refuge in our practice. So that's good. The other thing I would say is Tonglen is a practice that is so important, and I'm glad you're doing it, because from the most simple of Buddhist practices to the most complicated ritual practices we do, Tonglen in one form or another is there. And so using it is a really critical tool in your practice. Because it's through Tonglen, obviously, you're going to become more open and more in solidarity with your fellow beings. And as other people were saying, you know, we have people we have to learn to forgive and actually love. And Tonglen is a marvelous way to do that, training our mind against habit, training our mind to love even those that in our lives have been unlovable. So that's a beautiful practice. And certainly I'm sure Lama Kathy and I both would encourage you to continue on that. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else that wants to speak? Yes, Debbie.
During this past year, I know that I can relate to a lot of things that have already been spoken about, and working through mother issues with her dementia, and we had never had a close relationship. And so working through that, and then with my practice also, I'm experiencing that contraction and expanding, and that gets very frustrating sometimes, you know, but
Yeah.
I'm just keep going.
Yeah. I could imagine, and I'm just imagining, and you'll have to tell me if this is true or not. It would be very difficult to deal with a parent who has dementia, who you have issues with, for the simple fact normal dialogue is
Right.
sort of cut off. That's where what Justin does, which is Tonglen, can be so valuable. So I challenge you to use Tonglen to work with that. Not only with, you know, of course, we want to extend it to all beings, but the lineage masters tell us we start with those closest to us.
Right.
Because they're the most difficult. So start with your mother, who has caused you pain, but because of circumstances you aren't able to dialogue with them. But on a spiritual level and a spiritual plane, you can still, in a sense, dialogue with her, and somehow that will be conveyed to your mom, and also open you up. So I can only imagine that difficulty. It would be very hard. So
yeah, it's getting easier to open, you know, feel open with her. But there's still days when, you know, it's just a lot of work. If I've been around her, I'm exhausted.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah.
And you have to be patient with your own self that
Right.
sometimes that sometimes you aren't going to do it just like you should or would like to do.
Mhm.
But so that's okay. That's good. Practice, particularly Tong Lin, will get you through that.
Thank
The
you.
other side.
Mm.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Star.
Um, so the thing that I have noticed with my practice is that I tend to be more understanding when bad things happen, I guess. Um, for example, a good one is when the temple was burnt. I don't know if any of you know, but I used to go there every Saturday and clean. And that was, I'm sorry, I'm trying not to get emotional about it, but that was an important part of my practice for me, was to physically go every week and be the one to clean the altar and polish silver bowls. And it meant so much to me. And when it burnt, I cried. And but I am actually very thankful for the fact that that happened, because it was another lesson of impermanence. It was, I devoted myself to a physical thing, and it too was impermanent. I outlived it. you know, it burned a couple of weeks after I moved out of town, and um, that definitely was, again, that's I'm grateful for that, and for watching y'all build the new one, and being able to watch it from a distance, and see it come from the ashes of all that. And that's not a thing I would have done before. I would have just cried over the loss. And it still hurts. It still hurts. And it hurts that somebody did that to us. But I also, I understand that that person did that because they're hurting too, because they're suffering. And they didn't know how to deal with that. And so they struck out at us. And in doing so, they gave us an opportunity to learn a lesson in impermanence. And that really was a gift.
Exactly. So I'd also say that I think what you're saying too, Star, is that your aspirations and good wishes in regards to the rebuilding of the center is a practice. It's a and
very much so.
Yeah, and so it's not just money that's important here. Islamic has pointed out many times. Simply saying and wishing, may this building be built based upon the wishes of our guru, Khenpo Kaita Rinpoche, is a very powerful thing that is helping to accomplish that. So thank you for that. And I'm sure Lama Kathy would repeat the same thing. So keep wishing that. And I think this, but who knows, but I think this is going to come to fruition sooner rather than later, but we'll see, huh? So, but thank you. And by the way, your moving out had nothing to do with the place burning down.
Oh, I know. I was like, when I saw it, I was like, oh no, I left.
Yeah. So again, thank you. Lama Kathy, I need to take a little check here. I had no idea we would go this long this way. What do we want to do with our agenda from here on out?
Well, yeah. First of all, wow, what an amazing group of people. And thank you so much for sharing your hearts and your questions and your concerns and your joys and sorrows with the group. It's touching to me, and I'm just so happy to be part of this community. and the community of this little Zoom room and the bigger community of the KTC and so on. So I think that because the program, the morning part of the program was to go 9:30 to 11:30, maybe the thing to do now is to sort of bring the morning to a close and inaugurate the break and give everybody some chance to refresh and relax, and then we could reconvene. I apologize. I have forgotten what time the afternoon session was supposed to start. Let me take a quick look, unless someone knows it.
1 o'clock, I believe. 1 o'clock.
Let's see.
1 o'clock.
Okay. Okay, great. So maybe the thing to do then is to take a little rest, and then when we get back, I think we have so many possible things we could do. We could continue discussion. We could talk a little bit about practice, or we could do some practice and then do questions about practice, or there's many different things we could do with the time we have.
Yeah, it's funny how this has sort of evolved, because initially I did not think we would have things to fill in the morning session. And obviously we have. The other possibility here is after our lunch break, Lama Kathy could continue on the discussion about the Mahamudra aspirational prayer. Or, and this is fine with me, we could just use that time, most of that time anyway, with practice. What would be, let's say, a show of hands, which would you rather do, more practice, or would you like to have further explanation of the Mahamudra prayer? Let's try more practice first. Hands raised. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I see 5 hands raised. Is that right? 6.
Yeah. So,
6 hands.
Okay. Okay.
So it's sort of half and half. Would give us a break, and allow me, Kathy and I will discuss and we'll figure it out. So we'll let you go. What I have an assignment for you during lunch. Here's the assignment. You're still in retreat, even when you're on lunch. So try to avoid running to Facebook or your phone or Zoom or whatever else you might do, and sort of keep the activities to just what you have to do, like eating and stuff like that, and going to the bathroom and whatnot. And I would like for you to have this as a sort of a contemplation during the lunch break, and it's directly from the Great Path of Awakening, and it goes like this: in post meditation practice, be a child of illusion. So what does that mean? Well, let's just read what John Control says. He says, after meditation, do not allow the experience of resting evenly to dissipate. No matter what form of activity you engage in, continually foster the feeling of knowing that all experiences, yourself and others, animate and inanimate, appear though they seem to be nothing. Appear though they seem to be nothing. Be a child of illusion. So that's what that's your homework assignment. During this break, don't get involved in a lot of stuff, to the extent you can avoid that, and just be a child of illusion, as John Control instructs us. That clear? Cool. So we'll break. Anything else, Lama Kathy?
No, I think that's fantastic, and we'll dedicate this the merit of our morning session to the benefit of all sentient beings. I see a couple. Somebody said that they're not going to be able to be here for afternoon. Don't worry, we will record for you. This recording, by the way, will be made unlisted, which means that no one can navigate to it on YouTube, and only the people who were here today can see it. And the URL for that will come to you sometime tomorrow at the earliest or Monday at the latest. So thank you. Okay, I want me to go ahead and recite a short prayer for you, Lama Tom?
please.
Okay, here we go. Through this merit, may all achieve the omniscience of Buddhahood. May it defeat our common enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may we free all beings. May we free all beings. May we free all beings.
So we'll see you after lunch and at 1 o'clock for those that are returning.
Okay, great. And Tanya and I'll have the Zoom room open a few minutes early, so you can join. Okay, thanks, guys.